Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic.
Hey Woo Crew, I wanted to let you know about the summer healing special that I am running. For the months of July, August, and September, I am offering support in the form of remote healing packages. So this looks like bi-weekly remote energy healings and readings with voice note support in between. Really the perfect way to receive healing and guidance through those busy summer months when maybe you don't have time to add another appointment to your calendar. You choose the day of the week, I drop into your energy while you go about your day, and I send over the guidance that I receive from your guides and the healing work that I do, along with any tools or homework that may be useful to you on your journey by voice note. In addition, you get voice note support in between these sessions for the entire month. If you are interested in jumping into this, I've left the link to hop on in below, but you can also come on over to Instagram at I am Eileen March or send me an email, Eileen@myluminous.life. I've left a link below as well for a 30-minute free coffee chat to discuss whether this offer is a fit for you.
Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and this week I am joined by a dear friend. Kyla Gagnon is here with me this week, and Kyla is a magical somatic breathwork facilitator and embodiment and empowerment leader for women. She is the host of the Reclaimed podcast, which I highly recommend you listen to, and is the founder and CEO of the Essentials Breathwork membership. Kyla's mission is helping women around the world reclaim their power through somatics, breathwork, and embodiment work. Welcome to the podcast, Kyla.
Thank you, my lovely. So nice to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. We were just chatting before we hit record that I was recording on Kyla's podcast earlier this week. And
it will be out next week.
Yeah, it'll be out next week. So when you're listening to this, you get to hear us in conversation twice in reverse order from how we did it. And as I mentioned before we hopped on, Kyla, I really love to start each of my guest episodes by asking my guests a little bit about their journey into spirituality or into the woo and what brought them into the work that they're doing today.
Oh, okay, yeah. It could be a long story. I won't let it be a long story, but I grew up with the curiosity. I think thanks to my mom, who had this, her witch side was definitely trying to come out, and it did in ways. You know, she was incredible in the garden and knew plants and just had this way with humans and was a nurse. And so I feel like any of you in that caring realm, it's just built in. So, you know, we would go to intuitives, we would go to psychics, we would have our tea leaves read, we would work with mediums. And it was always really interesting to me, fascinating to me. And I always had the story that it was for other people and that I could just go to them for their knowledge and their connection to spirit, and that I would receive the information through them, which I did. And it wasn't until way later in life that I realized that I too actually am that. And so there was always a curiosity, and it always kind of sat in the background. And it actually would have been a ceremony with psilocybin, would have been my first in my adult life reintroduction into the realm of spirituality and the other worlds. And it was an incredibly profound evening for me with a really incredible, I don't even know what to call her, medicine woman, alien, fairy, like, wow, this human is so cool. And I then found myself in a breathwork ceremony without knowing what breathwork was. And in that ceremony, so up until that point, I had been working in fitness. I had been running a personal training business and competing in fitness and working with, supplement companies and magazines and living this very different life that a little bit kept me separate from spirituality because it was so physical and surface and showy and, I'll use the word fake. It just felt really superficial. And there was a part of me that really knew that there was more somewhere. And I found this breathwork journey, or it found me, and everything changed in that hour. And I proceeded to leave that business that I'd built for 15 years and drop fully and completely into the training of somatics and trauma work and breath work. And that whole training, I don't know, I'm sure plenty of your listeners have done like a yoga teacher training.
Right.
And there's this thing that happens, and everybody knows this. Everyone who's done one, that life is different after a yoga teacher training. It's so profound. It's so soul opening. It was like that, where I was like, I can't explain this, but everything is different in my life. And that meant like my connection to spirit was back open. Right. Because after doing a breathwork session, and those who have experienced a conscious connected breathwork session might agree that you meet spirit, you meet your wisdom, you meet parts of yourself that are unseen, that aren't explainable. And you have experiences that aren't explainable and tangible and logical. And so it would be impossible for me to do my work and not have a relationship to spirit. Yeah.
I love hearing the way that everybody's thread kind of leads back through their life, even those who didn't explicitly understand the connection to spirit or to that more than human realm. It's always there, and it's fascinating to hear how it ebbs and flows throughout life.
And it comes when it's, most needed. I mean, it's always there, but it's loudest when it's most needed.
Yeah.
So grateful
if we can listen to it.
Well, that's the other. That's the tough one.
Yeah, and I love that part of your story is this, this one transformative breathwork session. Having experienced breathwork myself with you and with a few other practitioners, I know how powerful it can be. But for the listeners who might not know what the heck we're talking about when we say conscious connected breath work, can you describe it?
I can try. I can try. I'll describe it two ways. I'll describe it like actually tangibly how we do it, which would be, generally speaking, you're lying on your back and you are breathing in and out through your mouth. And we do that because it creates a bigger exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which activates your internal landscape a bit more. And these sessions are about 60 minutes to 75, maybe even 90 minutes long. They're facilitated with music often and facilitator in bracket plural potentially, depending on how many of you there are. And it's this exploration of being in your body. It's a somatic practice where we're allowing the body to speak similarly to spirit. And then it's like, okay, am I going to listen? Do I even know how to listen to my body? Do I have any idea how to actually listen to the language that my body's been speaking to me my whole life? So it's this time that we can come into that practice and start to meet ourselves in a way that we probably haven't met before. And it's different every time. So I know you've breathed a lot. I've breathed a lot and the experience is different every time. And the way I connect with and hear and feel my body is different every time. So really, in terms of how do we do it, there's not much to it. You lay on your back, you open your mouth, you breathe. It's a vibrant inhale. It's a soft exhale. The way I describe it visually is like a jellyfish. Mm-hmm. And so it actually, so do I. It becomes this really soft, easy, actually very easy jellyfish-like or circular breath. It's often called circular breathing as well, where we actually start to remove the pause. So we're working towards removing the resistance and landing in a place of just trusting that our body actually knows how to do this, and that there's a part of us that is wiser than we ever will understand. And can I trust myself? So, and kind of reflecting on our conversation that will be on my podcast next week, we talked a lot about this, like trusting self. And so that's conscious connected breathwork. It's allowing us to access the subconscious. It's allowing us to access those subtle places where we have stored all of our stuff. Like it's kind of like the junk drawer, or, the closet that like no one opens because it's going to fall out when you open the door. It's just so jam-packed full of stuff. And we can't help that. That's just what humans do. It's just how our system is. Our cells, our body retains and holds every experience. And mostly because we aren't taught or we aren't given permission to express our experiences and to have emotions about our experiences, or to acknowledge when we're upset or scared or hurt or sad or really excited or in deep pleasure or whatever. We live in a society where we haven't been taught how to be with those, or there just isn't time, or like hurry up and get over it. And so all of those unfulfilled experiences or shut down emotions live inside of our body, in our tissues, in our cells, in our DNA. Like this comes from our ancestors.
Yeah, that epigenetic piece is there. We've talked about that on this podcast before many a time. I like to wax poetic about it.
It's there. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. Yeah. We hold a lot. And this practice is a permission slip and a space that we can safely go into that, right? Just to be with our body and then express whatever comes up. And in that, a lot of what comes up isn't ours. And so sometimes you might have an emotion arise where you're like, my eyes are crying a lot. And I'm like really in a big cry, but I don't actually have any emotional connection to this. I don't really know what's going on. Well, then it isn't yours. Mm-hmm. But what a gift to be able to process it for somebody who couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It helps us create capacity, to hold more, hold more love, to hold more intention. Imagine if you have a family and children and a partner, imagine what it would be like if you weren't jam-packed full of all of the things stressing you out, and you actually had capacity to be with them and to be with their big emotions because yours aren't exploding out of you. Or if you run a team at work, or anything, it's just, we aren't meant to hold all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so breathwork is an opportunity for us to clear some stuff, shift out the debris, create capacity, and become more of us. Less of the junk that we hold and more of us.
Yeah. It is it's an amazing modality. And you spoke to this a little bit, but it does take you on a bit of a journey. As you were talking, I was thinking about how, as you said, every breathwork experience is different. And I have a tendency when I go into one to want it to be something, to want it to be an experience I've already had, or, a big catharsis, or have some insight. Similar to entering into a psilocybin journey, for instance, with medicine, is that, I want it to be or feel a certain way. And I think part of the magic, and I'm learning this more, and I have a lot less attachment now, but is surrendering to the flow of what is coming up. Mm-hmm. We don't surrender often in our lives, as women especially. I had this conversation with a client actually just 2 days ago in a call, and I used the word surrender, and she immediately
kind of her shoulders went up and she started crying.
Yeah.
And it was this sense of, that's not a safe place for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much power in having a modality and somebody holding that safe place where we can go to surrender.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I have a history with that word as well, and I love it now, and I actually find it to be a really powerful word now.
Mm-hmm.
In my breath training, a lot of our practices would begin with a dyad practice, and I don't know if do you know what a dyad?
I mean, it's two.
It's two. It's two of something. Yeah, this is such a beautiful practice. I encourage you, but also the listeners, if you can go to an event or a workshop where there's a dyad practice being facilitated, please go. It's essentially a deep listening practice and a really permissive speaking practice, I guess. So let's say you and I are in a dyad together and it's being facilitated by someone. That's the easiest way to do it. There will be a question posed or an invitation, and you and I will decide who's going to ask the question first and who's going to respond. So let's say, Eileen, you were going to ask the question and I was going to respond. So the question that was asked in this breath training of mine was, tell me what surrender means. And so, the way this would go is Eileen would ask me, she would say, Kyla, tell me what surrender means. And then at that point, you just hold space for me to speak.
Right.
And I can speak for as long as I want. I can say one thing, I can say 10 things. And you don't interrupt with any words. Even if there's no, oh yeah, me too. I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh yeah, that happened to me. None of that. It's just space holding. You can nod, you can emote if it's sad or if it's tender, but there's no words. And when I'm done, you simply say thank you. And then I flip and ask you the question. And we go back and forth. And that's the key, is going back and forth. It's like that. I don't know if anyone's done that, like the why practice, like,
oh yeah, the
and
7 levels of why.
The 7 levels of why, which is brutal.
Crying by 4th level every time.
Yeah, this is similar to that, right? The first answer is always pretty superficial, surface level, and then as we go deeper and deeper and deeper, we get closer and closer and closer to the truth. And so when I was asked this question, my first response was failure. It's weak. It's giving up, it's pathetic. Surrender, like it was so heavy. And they kept asking me and we were going back and forth, and the deeper we probably went for 15 minutes, which felt like an hour. I'm sure. It felt like days. And when we got to the last one and they asked me, Kyla, what is surrender? I was at the point where I was like, oh, it's trust. It's safety, like it's trust. Oh, and I was sobbing and I felt so good because I could see my personal layers of resistance slowly crumble away and get to my truth. When I responded with it's failure, it's letting yourself down, it's giving up, that was someone else's story that I have taken on. It was societal, it was from movies, it was from really, shadowed masculine, like, I'm never giving up. Like, yeah, it wasn't
never give up, never surrender.
Totally. It was not my truth. And now, especially as a woman, like actually, I'll stop. It doesn't matter who you are. Feminine and masculine energetics, one of the components of like the grounded, anchored, clear, divine feminine is the absolute unwavering trust and like support they feel by universe, spirit, nature. It is surrender. It's the ability to know that I actually don't have to control everything. I can't control everything. And I know that I am taken care of. I know that I'm taken care of. And so I understand why that's a really tough one for a lot of people, because we haven't always felt taken care of.
Yeah.
And I will just encourage everyone to play with that belief a little bit, play with your story a little bit. Yeah. What's underneath that initial like freeze up or like, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many things are happening in my head right now. That's what always happens to me. Like I want to ask 8 different questions at the same time. But what really the shiniest thread that I'm following here is that, you know, I've spoken a lot. I've spoken to you about it. I've spoken on my podcast about it. This sense of trying to reclaim or rediscover a balance between that sacred feminine and sacred masculine. Our society has been so in the masculine, which is rational, analytical, action in the world, take charge kind of energy. And I'm seeing so much potency and prevalence of these somatic practices coming up and practitioners coming up and people leaning into somatic ways of healing. And it just struck me that along with surrender, that divine feminine energy also is of the body. And so that whole side of somatic healing, things like breath work, movement, all of that, it's a really direct cord back into the divine feminine that lives in all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And so here's like a very tangible practice for everybody. If you're thinking like, well, how do I start to balance? Like, oh my gosh, I'm totally in my masculine. I see it. How do I come back into my feminine? Okay. Well, most of our days, I believe, whether we have a job or whether we raise a family, still a job, just different. Whatever we do, if you're living in the world in 2024 and onward, you're having to be totally turned on, thinking, watching, planning your next step, numbers, strategy. How am I going to pay for this? What am I going to do there? We need to get the kids to here, but they also need to be like, there's so much thinking for its survival. Our brain is survival based. So it will plan everything to make sure that we're not stressed out, because if we're stressed out, then there goes like, are we going to survive? It's this whole hilarious cycle that exaggerates everything, but nonetheless, thinking is survival based. And we need it. It's a necessity, of course. Yeah. So, okay, noticing I'm in my thinking. Wow, I've had a really busy day at work, busy day with the family. I've definitely been in my head all day long. How can I get in my body? Well, I could go for a walk without music, without my phone, without a podcast. I could put on my favorite music and dance. I could go out in the yard with my kids and just roll around and be silly. I could make love to my partner. I could get a massage. Yeah. I could go to a body worker. Yeah. I could meditate. I could do yoga. I could probably go to the gym. I could get back in my body. So there's lots of ways. You don't need to overcomplicate. All of those are available to you without needing a facilitator to lead you through a breathwork session. Of course, if that's available to you, yeah. But if it's not, shake, tremor, stomp, jump up and down, roll around, roll around on the ground like you're 3. Like roll around on the floor with no aim, no direction, no judgment. Just roll. Notice what your body does.
Have fun with it and breathe. Like breathe. 3 deep breaths is often all it takes to come back. And it's so quick and you have it with you at all times. And it's so available and very free.
It's the most free.
It's the most free and you're doing it anyways. So we hope you're doing it anyways. Please don't be holding your breath while listening to this podcast.
Yeah, everybody take a big deep breath here. Exhale.
Yeah. Right now. And the playful aspect too. I love that you mentioned that. I think it was when this airs, I don't know how many episodes ago, but I did a little solo episode on the importance of play as adults and how good it is for our creativity and for our connectivity, both connection to ourselves, but also to those around us. And, it is so overlooked again in this world that we live in. That's like, no, you have to be doing, you have to be producing, you have to be busy, you have to be thinking ahead and planning at all times. To play seems frivolous.
It does. We don't have time for that.
Yeah. And we don't have time not to.
Precisely. Yeah. That's been one of my personal, like, biggest teachings from Spirit. And that did come through a medicine journey where I went into it with the intention to meet my spirit guides. This is so ridiculous. This is so funny. I went in with this like really stern, I want to meet my spirit guides. I want to connect to spirit. And so I'm in this journey, and behind the curtains of my eyes, there was actually like old school movie theater curtains. These big velvet curtains. And this little, I don't know, circus guy, little gremlin-y guy was like rolling the curtain up out of the corner and trying to get me to giggle. And I was like, no, not right now. No. And he kept trying, and it kept getting bigger, and there was more of them. And they were hilarious. And I was fighting back the laughter. I was trying so hard to be serious and like stay, in my, I don't know, whatever I was trying to do. And I don't know, half an hour went by where it took that long of me fighting and resisting before this really loud message was like, you need to play. You are so stiff and rigid and serious. You need to play. And I thought about, from a young age, from a very young age, I don't know, 6, 7, I felt like I had to be responsible and an adult and serious. And I didn't want to be the like silly little girl, right? Oh, just a silly little girl. I wanted to be respected. And so I've maintained this really serious way of living for a very long time. And that message came in loud and clear that like, oh, you want to connect to spirit? Loosen the hell up. Loosen up. And now I know that spirit's really funny.
Yeah.
Like spirit is goofy and funny and playful. They're not rigid.
No. I remember one time, probably about this time last year, I was trying to do more. And I was struggling. And I, mid-afternoon, was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take my own advice right now. I'm going to go lay down on the couch and close my eyes. And I did. And my guides all gathered around and started cheering. I was like, yes. I'm trying to rest, guys. What are you doing here? But it was this real sense of like, oh, right. Okay. Yes, this doesn't, it can be sacred and it doesn't have to be serious.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good reminder.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking to something that a lot of women, especially, again, women, men, I know most of the listeners are women, so that's where we speak for the most part here. But many of us grew up being the responsible one, right? The comment, oh, you're so mature for your age, that always felt like such a compliment. And now in hindsight, I'm like, oh no, that was really a sign of something not being as it in an ideal world should be for a child to be so responsible and so mature. And at 18, everyone was like, oh, I thought you were at least 25. And before that, it was always, many years older. And it's an unlearning to reconnect with those whimsical, playful aspects of ourselves. And again, it's a bit of that surrender too, because it doesn't always feel safe to do so.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm an only child, but my dad's side he has a lot of siblings and they all have children. And I was the youngest of like 12 cousins, and I always hated it. Hated being the youngest. I just wanted to be old and cool, responsible. Right. Yeah.
I'm the eldest of all my cousins by 6 years. And I was an only child for nearly 8 years because my sister's almost 8 years younger than I am. So I think it's that flip side is like I was the eldest, I was the responsible one, and whatever other perfectionist tendencies came along.
It's so wild, like just what you said there. I know a lot of parents are like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to screw my kids up. I'm going to like do something and screw them up. you could be the perfect parent. If you have 3 kids and you have an eldest and they feel responsible, you've done nothing. You have done nothing, but they are still going to take that story through life that they have to be the ones that are responsible. And that's going to trickle into all different parts of their life. It's just fascinating to me how these stories just weave themselves into our life and become norm. And, you know, most of us will go our whole life not even present to them.
Yeah, it's that examination piece. I think that's the most incredible part of this journey that I've been on over the last 4-ish years, since kind of stepping into first life coaching and then the energy medicine side of what I do, is that I spent my whole life not really knowing myself. And nobody taught me how to investigate that part, and that 98% that drives, that subconscious 98% that drives our behavior and our belief patterns. And I'm just thinking of our mutual friend Jen, who's a teacher, and she brings this stuff into her classroom with her grade 5s, and those kids are just so lucky to be able to have this mindset work and this really conscious way of looking at themselves and their behaviors and their beliefs at such a young age. It gives me hope.
Yeah.
It gives me hope for the future.
That's very cool. I'm so glad that she's doing that.
Yeah, me too. Let's talk a little bit. Let's come back to that. There's 2 things that I wrote down from your notes of reclaiming self and the inner wise woman. And I think these are such beautiful weavings between, like, both of us touch on these in our own way in our work. For you, what does it mean to reclaim yourself?
It's a big question.
I know, it's huge.
It's so big. Wow. To reclaim yourself, to me, means to first to understand the root, the origin of your stories and beliefs and patterns and behaviors and defense mechanisms and all of these isms that make us us. And not with the energy of like, I need to fix this or change it, but of curiosity and, let me discover this. Let me understand this. Because once we understand something, we now have power. When we don't understand it, we don't have power. We don't know what the hell to do. You know, and it's similar to, you know, a medical situation. If you, I don't know, have a rash and the doctor's like, here's an antibiotic, here's a steroid cream, put it on. But why the rash? Why the rash? Versus going to your naturopath and them, you know, checking, I don't know, what you ate, what supplements are you taking, like how is your sleep, how is are you stressed? And finding the root, that gives you power. You're like, oh, it's from that thing. I can choose to not have that thing in my life anymore. Great. So it's like, actually, yeah, that just might be my answer. I was going to go deeper, but I think just understanding the roots of where you come from, of where your behaviors come from. And that's going to involve, you know, traveling down the inner child journey, the path, which I just don't think we can do any version of self-evolution or growth or healing without going there. I know it, actually. I don't think it. I know it. And it's a really beautiful journey. It's like really sweet. It's really sweet. You know, it's all it is accessing and meeting you at your most precious phases in life. What do you mean you don't want to hang out with 3-year-old Eileen? Of course you do. She's so cute.
Right.
And innocent. Yeah, I want to spend time with her.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space to start to really cultivate self-compassion too, because you can't be not compassionate towards an infant, a toddler, a small child. Like, there is only compassion for them, and if you can follow that they are you, it really helps. And that piece, like that you mentioned about, without knowing the root, you can't choose otherwise either.
No, you're kind of stuck there.
Yeah, you can't choose to let it, as in my preferred metaphorical terms, fall to the earth to be compost, to fertilize the soil for where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And similar to that, like, give it back to the earth, compost it to the earth. I'll say, like, give it back. If I'm leading a session, like, give that back. If there's a big emotion coming up or a story, and like, yes, give it to her, give it to Mother Earth. Like, she wants this. She can alchemize this and turn this into pixie dust. Like,
she can
give it
she has
back.
Infinite capacity to hold. Yeah. And it's in that discovery, in that reacquainting with the inner child, in that reclamation of your core, who you are under all those layers that have been piled on over generations. That's where I believe, anyways, that you meet your inner wise woman.
I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, she's there.
She's just waiting.
Yeah.
And
she's so excited.
Thank you for saying that. I was just going to say she's waiting, but she's also not irritated about it. She's not angry. She's not looking at her watch. She's got all the time in the world. She's got lifetimes. She'll come back lifetime after lifetime. And she's so excited for you to acknowledge her. Oh, she's so excited.
So for listeners who are curious about having some of these journeys through breath work, guided by, I have to, before we even ask you this, I have to say that if you have never done breath work, or if you have done breath work but it hasn't been with Kyla, you haven't done breath work. There is something absolutely, I'm gonna get teary, extra magical about the space that you hold. And so for any of our listeners who might want to experience breath work and your magic and anything else that you have that's coming up that you're offering, how can people connect with you? What do you have coming up?
Wow, thank you for that. Just want to let that sit. We're in the middle of August, so I've officially closed the doors to the breath membership for a little while, but there's a wait list, and it's a good time in there. So we do meet twice a month for these breath journeys in Zoom, and we also have a big juicy library for you to access a bunch of somatic practices, breath work, movement, meditation. There's beautiful guest educators in there, guest teachers, Eileen being one of them. And so there is a wait list for that, and it will open up again. So join that if you're curious. And I also have coming up, if I haven't spoken about it yet on my social media and on my website, it's coming incredibly soon. But I'm launching a 10-week program called Her, which is all about us journeying in as a collective. Well, it'll be a group program to meet and to evoke this inner goddess, inner queen, inner wise woman. To me, I think they're all the same. And let me just say this, at this point, all of the information will be on my website, so I'm not going to pretend to have the details of my sales page here for you, but that, I'm so excited for that. And of course, there's sweet little freebies, just some breath practices on my website, always on my Instagram for people to explore. Yeah.
Yay. And all of the links for all of this will be in the show notes, as always. Kyla is at The Sacred Essentials on Instagram, so it's easy to find her there too. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited about everything that you have, that you offer. I always feel like every time I get an email from you, I'm like, how is she creating more? So there's
she's a Manny Gen.
So she is a manifesting generator. Yes, she is. I have to remind myself of that frequently.
Through and through.
Yeah. But there's always just so much generosity, and I love reading your emails, and it's a pleasure to be on that list. So even just hopping on her email list and making sure you're on the wait list for when the Sacred Essentials opens up again, or when the Essentials opens up again.
I'm actually going to rename the whole thing too. We're doing a full rebrand. So if there are links that need to be rerouted, they'll just be rerouted.
Perfect.
But there's just more excitement, more things happening. Oh my goodness.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It was a real joy to chat. You're
Such
welcome.
a treat.
And And for all of you listening, thank you so much, Woo Crew, for being here with us. As always, please leave a rate and review if you like this episode. Wherever you're listening, it really helps get discovered. And if you feel called to share on your Instagram, don't forget to tag us at I am Eileen March and at The Sacred Essentials. Bye for now.